The spider is building a safe home for its killer, but it's not doing it by choice. Its killer is controlling its brain. As unbelievable as it sounds, this nightmare plays out in nature every single day, and this incredible creature is called Polysphincta boops. Let's discover the unbelievable life cycle of one of the world's most mysterious parasites. Polysphincta boops is a species of ichneumon wasp, a group of parasitic wasps. Unlike ordinary wasps, they do not build nests to raise their young. Instead, they rely entirely on the body of another living creature to continue their bloodline. Their primary target is the orb weaver spider, the spiders that weave perfectly circular webs. When a female Polysphincta boops finds a suitable spider, she attacks within seconds. First, she temporarily immobilizes the spider. Then, with incredible precision, she attaches a single egg to the outer surface of the spider's abdomen. Once that's done, the wasp's job is finished. She flies away, but that's when the real horror begins. A few days later, a tiny larva hatches from the egg. It doesn't kill the spider immediately because the living spider is both its food and its shelter. The larva clings to the outside of the spider's body and slowly begins feeding on its body fluids and tissues. Surprisingly, however, it feeds in a way that keeps the spider alive for as long as possible. In other words, it avoids damaging the spider's vital organs in the early stages, so its food source stays alive as long as possible. But that's not the end. The most astonishing event happens during the larva's final stage of development. At this point, the spider's behavior suddenly changes completely. The spider that once built webs to catch prey now begins constructing an entirely different kind of web. This web is not meant for catching insects. Instead, it is much stronger, thicker, and more durable. Scientists call it a cocoon web. The strange part is, once this special web is finished, the spider has no purpose left because this web was never built for itself. It was built to safely support the future cocoon of Polysphincta boops. In other words, right up until the moment before its death, the spider builds a home for its enemy's offspring. Scientists believe that the larva likely releases chemicals that affect the spider's nervous system and hormones. As a result, the spider abandons its normal behavior and begins acting entirely in the parasite's best interest. It is as if the spider has been biologically programmed while still alive. Exactly which chemicals are responsible for this behavioral change, however, are still not fully understood. That is why Polysphincta boops remains one of the most fascinating subjects of scientific research. Once the special web is complete, the larva no longer keeps the spider alive. It finally kills its host. Then it builds its own cocoon, suspended from the center of that strong web. The web is so durable that it can withstand wind, rain, and minor impacts without being easily destroyed. In other words, before dying, the spider leaves behind a secure shelter where its enemy's offspring can safely develop. A few days later, an adult Polysphincta boops emerges from the cocoon, and then the same terrifying cycle begins again. A new spider, a new egg, another living body, and another controlled life. There are many predators on Earth, but very few creatures do more than simply kill their prey. Instead, they turn their victim into a servant for their own offspring. Polysphincta boops is one of those rare creatures. It reminds us that the most terrifying weapon in nature isn't always physical strength. Sometimes the greatest power is the ability to change another creature's behavior. And that is why this tiny parasitic wasp can truly be called one of nature's most mysterious mind manipulators. Do you think this is one of the most terrifying parasites in the natural world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to discover more unbelievable creatures like this, be sure to stay with us.